large companies, but my passion has always been in indie film. So my partner and I had a short. First film I ever made went to Sundance. Wow, it was the coolest thing I'd ever done. I thought, wow, this would be really cool if I could have a career in film. Unfortunately, well, a couple things happened. I started producing a serious documentary inside of San Quentin prison. So a lot of the stuff that we've talked about here today, I went through the logistics, just getting into San Quentin to do it. Produced a promo reel, went to a Sundance Producers Conference, started to pitch it, and while I was there, I got a call from my wife saying that she's pregnant. So the rest is history when I realized that I might have to go back to a day job and not pursue my passion. So several years passed, the story gets happier. We co-founded Synagogo, and it really was with the passion of what I feel as an indie filmmaker and the sincere belief that there needs to be something else for how independent film gets distributed. And I'll get into the details here. And I'm not talking about just watching on the small screen in the living room. It really is to have a big screen social experience in a country where really the megaplexes just don't have enough shelf space for the amount of film that's produced every year. So with that, let's just start talking about how we delineate between the small screen and the big screen. Can everybody see okay? Very quickly, I'll fly through these. We know that it's television, DVD, and really now the emergence of web and video on demand. And I'm going to get into these in a little more detail a little bit later, but it is a very crowded space, and there's a whole universe of programming out there to fill up all these. On the flip side, big screen, it's a $10 billion market, but it really is dominated by the megaplexes. About 6,000 theaters in this country representing about 40,000 screens. And yet when Avatar comes out or when Iron Man 3 comes out, they are going to get 9,000 or 10,000 out of those 40,000 screens. I mean, literally, if you think of it like a supermarket, the cereal aisle is completely dominated by the studios. In comes something I like to call micro-theatrical. A whole class of smaller venues that aren't movie theaters, but still now are emerging with digital projection systems, screens, sound systems, and literally events are already happening in places like this. So what sort of online tools can we build to take advantage of what's happening in the marketplace already and create a new distribution channel for filmmakers? So taking a step back and just really looking at what the current state is of the US distribution market. I already said Avatar films dominate the $10 billion market. So you hear, ooh, $10 billion. Well, 10% is one film. And by the time you get past the top 100 films, about 85% of that $10 billion. And like I said, they get all the shelf space in the movie theaters. There's a big barrier to entry for indie films. Usually the P&A budget that we talked about earlier could be $30,000, $35,000 to do a national release. One good thing that's working in the favor of indie filmmakers is that theaters are piloting now four-walling for indie filmmakers thanks to digital screens. And digital screens are now taking off because of 3D movies, so now we have something like 8,000 3D screens across the country. So it's out there, still expensive. Next we have DVD, where literally within a couple of years, the DVD market has shrunken by 43% down to $8 billion. So this market used to be bigger than the theatrical market, and now it is substantially smaller. And it's going to pretty soon join the VHS in video heaven. And lastly, the one that we should all focus on the most is video on demand. And when I say VOD, it is online as well as cable, as the two are obviously converging now, and it's ultimately going to be a big fat digital pipe into your house. And whatever way we can take advantage of that will work to our favor. So this is a $2.5 billion market already and growing. Unfortunately, again, it's emerging now that a handful of companies are dominating this space. The biggest, of course, we all know is Netflix. So right now, Netflix offers for $8 an all-you-can-eat buffet of video on demand. So if the average person in this room is a subscriber, pays $8 and let's say watches 20 films a month, that means the revenue for Netflix for one film would be about 40 cents per viewer. So it's shrinking the margins and actually makes it very unattractive and unappealing for video on demand if that's the emerging model. I think things are going to change there, so I'm optimistic about that. Another very encouraging thing is that the studios are comfortable now, or getting, at least piloting, the concurrent release windows of small screen and big screen. They're less hung up on it. It's got to be in the theaters for 3 months, and then we're going to season it, and then we're going to put it out into the other channels. So Magnolia, other studios are testing things where they're overlapping release windows. They're calling it premium video on demand with the cable companies. But then are you going to sit at home and pay $30 to see something on demand as opposed to going to the theaters? So a lot of stuff going on. This is not my main focus. My main focus was then, how do we take the model of video on demand, but instead of having an incremental revenue of 40 cents a screening, or if you go through iTunes, $3 or $4 a screening, I want to have video on demand that could generate $1,000 per screening event. So in comes something I call the micro-theatrical opportunity. And micro-theatrical comes from the convergence of a lot of really cool things happening right now. First and foremost is the ubiquity of high-definition projectors now. Go to any place, classrooms, auditoriums, community centers, they've got industrial strength projectors that are running 720p or 1080p projectors. And remember, a 1080p projector produces 2 million pixels of resolution, and the first DCI standard from, is that me? Murphy's Law.
Your distributor.
Where was I? The first generation of the DCI, the Digital Cinema Initiative, which was for the megaplexes, was 2 million pixels. They've upped that now to 4K, so it's still a higher resolution, but with a 1080p picture, you can blow it up pretty big and have a pretty good theatrical experience. On the audience side, there are some great things going on where movies are happening in more places, and I've got a couple of examples here. We all know foreign cinema in San Francisco. The San Francisco JCC does screenings in their screening rooms. Have anybody go to the movies in the park at Dolores Park in the summertime? I love those. Love movies in the park. Schools. A film right now, Race to Nowhere, is basically being distributed through schools. And I'll talk later how schools are a big part of my focus right now. And my favorite also, parking lots. Has anybody ever done a mob move event? Have people heard of mob move? Love it.
What is it?
I will tell you. Funny you should ask. Drive-in movies have died as well, along with the small single-screen theaters. There are only about 600 drive-ins in the entire country. So someone had the bright idea, why don't we take a high, bright projector, an FM transmitter, and find some office park that has a big white wall and a parking lot where people can drive in and watch drive-in movies. I mean, think about it, it's like the ultimate in green because you're recycling, the parking lot that's not being used on a Friday night, and you're bringing back a drive-in movie. So people are getting very creative and inspired as to other ways of consuming film in a group social setting on the big screen where it's, immersive and you hear people laughing or screaming around you. And I kind of believe in that. I don't think it's all going to be us, sitting in your living room with your fuzzy slippers being a hermit watching videos of yourself. So I'm a fan of this happening. And then lastly, the other big trend for microtheatrical is just what viral marketing and social word of mouth can do to allow a filmmaker to have other people do the heavy lifting for you. I mean, we've talked about four-walling. Four-walling's been around for a number of years, but in that model, the filmmaker still has to do the heavy lifting of renting the venue, selling the tickets. And if you have audiences that believe in your work, you should get them to help with the heavy lifting and do some crowdsourcing around that. Any thoughts or questions? But yeah.
Cal, are you talking about your micro theatrical approach being like what the West Portal Theater is doing, and a theater out in Concord where I live, where there might be something on Broadway in New York, and they're sending it out
Yeah,
to a bunch of theaters?
that's slightly different, because that's one that, that's like Fathom Events, and they're digitally distributing to the megaplexes as well. So there's a little bit of that in the spirit of what I'm doing, but I'm not touching theaters at all at this point, primarily because of, you know, union projectionists and things like that, and the fact that I'm piggybacking off of a digital projector that's not approved by Hollywood. So it would be in a release window that's concurrent right now, you know, with, you know, the DVD cable release. And you know, it's too much work and pain to get it into the theaters. So it's like, what else can we do to get it into other venues?
Okay, 2 questions. One is, are you acting as a distributor to take somebody's film and then put it into these markets for somebody?
Yeah.
And then secondly, for broadband, could you just briefly mention?
I won't get it, yeah, okay, I'll get it. I don't want to be a distributor per se. I want to be a web platform that's a marketplace. And I'll go into explaining how right now we are much more focused on the venue side and are not opening our platform to the filmmaker side, because there's a little bit of a supply and demand problem, that there's supply, but I can't really do anything unless I have the demand. So I'll talk a little bit later how I'm very focused on creating audience demand and creating audience screening events in schools. That's our primary focus. And only by creating that demand can I ever go back to the supply side and talk to particular filmmakers. Now, Romulus is an example, which I'll get into a little bit later, but it all comes down to audiences. And are there people that can monetize it, or help monetize it for us? Yeah.
The long-term prognosis for theatrical screening, is that, will people always go to the movies in a theater, or is it going to be video on demand that's going to dominate the whole industry?
It depends on who you ask. I have talked to investors that have just shot me down because they said in a couple of years, theaters would cease to exist. I mean, there are some people that are absolutely convinced that we're all going to become hermits living in our houses and, you know, sort of like the Matrix, have it plugged into a net and just consuming things that way. I'm a little bit more of a social animal, where having a dinner and a movie on a Friday night kind of appeals to me. And I'd like to think that most people are still in the mode where, sure, there's the right time for watching something on your iPhone or watching it on your laptop or in your living room, but you know, we're still social animals.
It seems like we're grooming our young people to view movies off their computers or off DVDs or on digital on demand, and losing the experience of being in a theater with a bunch of other people and having that experience. And it would be awful if that experience were to go away.
Yeah, exactly. So, sure.
The general consensus that I've been exposed to is that there will always be movie theaters, but they will go more and more towards event pictures, like the Avatar, you know, things like that. And that people, because of the expense, I mean, you go to a movie now in LA, I don't know what it is here, but in LA it's $13.50 for a ticket. There are 2 of you plus parking plus popcorn is $10 now for popcorn and a Coke. So by the time you walk out of the movie, you're $40 to see a movie. So it better be, it's not some little independent movie. I'm gonna do that. I will do that at home on my big screen. The second thing, so you're gonna go towards those event pictures, and the other thing is that I have a friend who just signed a deal with a New York hedge fund. They gave him $1 million for 10 $100,000 iTunes movies. So and a lot of people, a lot of even celebrities get involved in those because they are experimental. They're fun. You know, they want to work, and so they go do these little independent movies. So you're going to have a lot of iTunes movies, and then you're going to have a lot of event movies, and then there's going to be fighting for the middle. Is my opinion.
I have